We affirmed South Africa's rating at BB- with a stable outlook in July, and the rating was driven on the negative side it was still being held down by the very high level of debt, by still upward path in our view of government debt over the medium term. Another negative factor was the extremely high level of inequality and a very high unemployment, which we believe will complicate consolidation efforts. And South Africa's rating is also held down by very low potential growth, which to some extent is one of the factors behind the high debt level, and to some extent also the social challenges. And we believe that the reforms undertaken and planned by the government, although to some extent impressive, are unlikely to fundamentally change the growth path, which, by the way, we are estimating at around 1.2%, which is below the trend growth of population. The reforms that have been undertaken, things like spectrum auctions and some measures on the network industries, are significant, but they're just not a big enough step to really change the path. And that is also true for the electricity crisis measures, which in the very short term may be insufficient to completely alleviate the risk of still quite substantial outages. And even in the medium term, will probably only reduce the risk of further downside moves of potential growth, rather than shifting the growth path upwards, really. On the positive side, South Africa's rating is certainly supported by the relatively benign structure of its debt, with long maturities, a relatively relatively low exposure to foreign currency debt risk, despite the fact that, of course, a relatively high share of its local currency debt is held by non-residents, which adds a degree of potential volatility. South Africa also benefits from a credible monetary and exchange rate policy framework. And I think that has served South Africa quite well, even in the very challenging context of the global crises over the last two years. The key things that we are now looking at is the progress on structural fiscal consolidation, so that the ability of the government to stabilize government debt, and rating changes could derive from any deviation from the path in either direction. So a stronger confidence in the ability to stabilize debt, for example, would certainly be a positive development from our perspective. And the other thing that we are looking at is just signs on the development of trend growth. For example, maybe that the government's reform measures actually turn out to be more effective in accelerating growth, and just generally the recognizing the uncertainty about trend growth, given that South Africa has been moved around by a long list of shocks over the last several years that make it very difficult to really assess the underlying path of growth.